So, you're a business owner dedicated to the significant and sustainable growth of both you and your business. Welcome to the Add a Zero podcast.
Hi and welcome to the Add a Zero podcast. I'm Jay Allen and I'm delighted to be sharing with you in this episode my thoughts on vision. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that you've heard 1,000 times over that we need to have a vision. So why am I talking about it on a podcast? Well, the simple fact is that whilst most people have one, invariably they're not doing it in the right format, and as a result they're not getting the right results. So today I want to talk to you about how to be able to create the vision and how to be able to work towards that to achieve it in the next 12 months as we move into 2025. Now, let me just quickly take you back to when you first started in business. That might be a few weeks or months ago, it might be a few years or possibly even a couple of decades ago. But let me take you all the way back to when you first started in business. Now, the chances are then that you started with a vision as to what it was that you wanted to achieve. You started out with a thought, an idea, an aspiration of what does success means to you in your future. And over the time that you've owned the business, be that, like I say, weeks, months, years, decades, you've been working slowly towards that. And the chances are that along the way, you've hit some targets and you've had to reset. Well, the risk is, as at the point of recording this now, just as we're about to end 2024, the chances are that we're just about starting to look at what does 2025 look like, or at least whenever you're listening to this, what does the next 12 months look like for both you and your business? And it might be that you say, well, I'd like to have more of this and less of that. I want more money and I want to have to work less hours. And it's the usual thing again and again and again, rinse and repeat. It's almost for me that Del Boy Trotter episode where he says to Rodney,
"This time next year, we'll be millionaires."
And the simple fact is, if that is the level of detail that we've gone into in order to be able to create a vision, then there's hardly any surprise as to why so many business owners fail to fully achieve what it is that they set out to do in the first place. So today I want to talk about how to be able to create a vision that you can hold yourself accountable to in order to be able to ensure that over the next 12 months you don't just hit it, but smash it. And it starts with what I call possibility thinking. You see, as a young child, and I'm not sure whether you're listening to this and you've already got young kids or you've had kids and they've subsequently grown up, but certainly as a young child, we don't understand the same level of restriction than we do as we grow up. I remember at 4 thinking that putting a cone on my head determined that I was able to pretend to be a space rocket. And I used to fly around or hurtle downstairs claiming that I was flying to the moon. Anything was possible. And yet as we grow up, those realities start to become more tamed. They start to become more measured. We start to look at the performance that we had over the last 12 months and then we use that as a measuring stick to determine as to what I'm capable of in the next 12 months. And it might be that certainly we've had COVID that's thankfully predominantly now behind us, but we've had the lockdown and we've had the big transition into digital intervention. The chances are that we've used the last 3 or 4 years as a measuring stick as to what you've actually been capable of achieving, and now you're utilising that as the measure of what you'd like to achieve in the next 12 months. And there's the first problem. You see, tomorrow hasn't yet happened. The future is yet to be written. And yet we're using the past and all of the things that we've been through to date as a measure of what we're capable of doing in the next 12 months. And we simply can't do that if we want to be able to achieve more than we've already got already. The first thing that we've got to do is to release ourselves from the here and now and move into a space where, as that young child with a funnel on his head hurtling around the house at home, that anything becomes possible. And this is where possibility thinking comes into. You see, rather than sitting where you are right now with pen and pad in hand and determining and writing down a few things of the things that you would like to achieve in the next 12 months, what I want you to do is I want you to take yourself out of the regular environment that you're in. I want you to move away from either your desk or the table or wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast today. I want you to be able to move away from the normality of day-to-day life. And I want you to sit in a place where just for a few moments you can just calm your eyes slightly and start to visualize on what it is that you want to achieve. I want you to become really quite specific of the things and what that life looks like. I want you to visualize as if you've already stepped into that place. I want you to move ahead of the current day and start to visualize yourself having already achieved it. Now, if you're familiar with The Secret, you'll know full well that they first profess that if you just visualize it and you concentrate on it hard enough, that it will appear. And I don't think life's quite as simplistic as that. But the first thing we need to do is to be able to unlock the current reality of where we sit today. We need to move into a place in our minds where we can go back to that creative thinking. We need to be able to move into a space where we can start to see ourselves in that level of success. We step up to the next level and we start to see what that looks like. We start to feel what it looks like. We start to be able to see ourselves within that space. And then I want you to document all of the things that you are now able to do, having already achieved it. I want you to write in the current tense as if it was already happening, as if you'd already achieved it. I want you to be able to visualize 12 months from now and then document all of the things that you're now able to do, having achieved everything that you want to achieve. So there's the first tip. The second tip is I need you to stop thinking that social media is the answer to finding the solutions to the problem that you currently face. I need you to stop going on Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn and Facebook and all the other social media platforms that are available and allowing your definition of the word success to be defined by what's being shown by other people on their platforms. You see, over the last 15, 20 years as a speaker, I've had the privilege of being able to speak in 34 countries to almost 500,000 business owners. I've met people called Jesus. I've met people called Goliath. I've met somebody called Ping. I've never met anybody called anybody. And yet the majority of people I talk to and say, who is it that you sell to? Their immediate response is, well, anyone who, and immediately anyone doesn't come to mind. I've never met somebody called anyone, so I can't visualize as to who it is that you're trying to sell to. However, my point for this podcast, and we'll come back to that point later on in this series, but my point for this podcast is of the 500,000 people I've had the privilege of being able to meet and interact and communicate with, I've never met anybody, and I've used the word there, anybody. I've never met anybody who has been able to define the word success in the same words and define it in the same manner. Not one person alive that I've met yet today has been able to say, I want what they've got exactly. I want to replicate their life and make it my own, like a doppelganger. My point for sharing this is the fact that success is so specific, not only to you, but into the circumstances you find yourself right now. Trust me, as you move forward in business and you hit the goals and targets that you set out to achieve, success becomes redefined all the time. We are constantly hitting milestones and then redefining what it is that I want next. Now I've hit 100k, I want to get to 500k. Once I've got to 500k, I want to get to 1 million. Once I've got to 1 million, I want to get to 5 or 10 or 25 million. The goals keep moving. And as a result of that, our understanding of the word success has to be specific to what it is that we want for our lives. Now, there's two things here. First of all, as the business owner, I want you to understand that success has to be a very specific thing to you and your lifestyle. It's got nothing to do with the business at the start of this exercise. I want you to define what your life success needs to look like in 12 months' time. I want you to describe in detail the house that you live in, the car that you drive, the clothes that you wear, the food that you eat, the lifestyle that you live. I want you to define the holidays that you take, the people that you meet, the social activities that you have, the sports club that you're a member of, the video club that you attend at the weekend with your family and your kids and the cinema. I want you to be able to define in detail how much time do you want to spend working in and on and with the business. I want you to define as to how much time do you spend away from the business. I want you to be able to have a really detailed, almost memo, it's almost like a diary entry of 12 months from now of what your life looks like. I want you to create a BFAG. Yeah, you heard it right, a BFAG. A big, fat, hairy, audacious goal, something that a 12-year-old child might have come up with, that we've almost become numb to as a more mature adult. I want you to go back to that creative spirit. I want you to be able to engage with whatever's possible in the world. I want you to be able to say, how do I make a bigger difference in my life, in the life of those that are working within the business, of every single stakeholder? How do I make a bigger difference in the community that I live within? How do I make a bigger difference in the professions to which I operate within? How do I make a bigger difference in the world? I want you to define what you want to achieve. I want you to create a BFAG that allows you to start moving into living your legacy as opposed to working so hard to leave a legacy. I want you to define what does success mean in the next 12 months to you. And once you've done that, we can then come back to the business and say, so what does the business need to be able to do in order for us to be able to achieve that in our lifestyle? How do we align the two? How do we ensure that as the business grows, you don't become busier and busier and busier and become more reluctant to being in work because it's taking you further and further away from what it is that you want to achieve in life? I want you to be able to spend some time understanding what you want to achieve so we can identify what we need to do within the business for it to provide that for you. Because surely as a business owner, that's the whole purpose of taking the risk of running your own empire, of your own company, of being able to make your own decisions. So once you've defined your own personal level of success, then we can come back into the business and identify, what do we need to do differently? What do we need to do more of? What do we need to do less of or not at all? What do we need to do differently in order for me to be able to move away from the things that are preventing me from achieving that in my life and moving closer and further toward that I want to achieve? And once you've been able to do this, then you can come back into the business and determine as to what differences, what changes do we need to make? What do we need to spend more time on and effort and resource in order to be able to move the needle closer to where it is that we want to achieve? It's all about being able to have a different set of visions in order to be able to set a different set of results. And that comes from a different level of thinking. Now, that's all right, Jay. It sounds wonderful for you. How on earth do I do that when I'm already so busy in the business? And the simple fact is that you will always be busy in business until you stop being. Until you allow yourself the time to understand that in actual fact, you are the most important person in your business. And it's only when you give yourself the time to do what's required in order to be able to move from where you are right now, be that an operator or an owner or a leader or the visionary or the CEO, where you are on your business journey is defined by the actions that you've chosen to take to date to get us to where we are. And if where you are today isn't the end result, if it's still a work in progress, then perhaps some of the things that we need to do first are being able to change who we are and how we do and what we do and with whom we do And that starts from a different level of thinking. There's a lovely expression, new level, new devil. And it means being able to let go of the things that have held you to where you are right now. What I want you to achieve from this particular episode is to understand that, first of all, creating a vision isn't about being able to say, what didn't we achieve this year? We'll just slide it over and we'll achieve it next year. It's not about utilising the internet or other people's definition of what success looks like in order for you to establish as to the watered down version of what it is that you actually want to achieve. And to understand that as a business owner, your personal vision should be the most primary focus, that we can then align the business to ensure that you have the two working collectively. And then throughout the entire year moving forward, we can hold the business to account to say, is this helping me to achieve what it is that we set out as a business to achieve for me to get to where I would like to be? The risk of not doing this is quite simple. There are so many businesses, not just yours or the local community. There are thousands and thousands of SME businesses that are either struggling or stagnant. And the risk is that if we don't do something different, we're allowing their level of progress to define our own. We can't afford to look externally to define what success means to us. We have to be able to obliterate and knock out the competition. We have to lock it out of our thinking. Stop looking at it on the internet. We need to be willing to be able to look internally and say, what is it that I want from my life? And is my business providing it for me? And if it's not, what do I need to do differently in order to be able to move closer towards the goal? A perfect example of this is a client I've been working with since January this year. When I first met them, they were already at about 2.6, 2.7 million. They wanted to be able to get to 5 million. They've been closer to it than they are already. And the lockdown crisis over 2020, 2021 had quite a significant impact on the business. They dropped about £750,000 by the time I'd met them and started to work with them. And one of the things that we did was we spent some time looking at the vision. And whilst the business vision was very clear and defined, the owner-manager hadn't really updated or determined as to how that contributed towards his personal vision, what he wanted from life, what he wanted from his business for him to define as success. And it was only when we pressed pause on the business and the progression of the business to be able to understand as to how is that impacting on his life, that we quickly determined that there was the need to be able to change his role, to be able to promote somebody within, to be able to take on board more responsibility. Admittedly, there was a salary review at the same time, but it's enabled them to be able to move forward as a business, for the owner managers to be able to really redefine what it is that he wants from life, and is his business providing that for him, to be able to change the parameters of what he does within his business in order for the business to continue to progress. Ironically, at some pace since we've done so, without him spending the 50, 60, 70 hours a week that he had been over the last 18 months or so. He'd perceived that the drop in income of the business was a direct result of his decisions over COVID, and therefore, in order to be able to put it right, he needed to work harder and longer and far more diligently than he had been doing previously. He had to come back into the business and roll his sleeves back up again. And the simple fact is that in itself was taking him further away from what it was that he wanted to achieve. He was moving further and further away from success in order to achieve success or greater revenue within the business. And it was only when we were able to redefine what he wants from life that we could understand that the role that he had been taking, the path that he'd been taking, was growing the business at the expense of his definition of what he wanted from life. Eventually, You end up regretting being in business. You end up being reluctant to turn up for work. And that energy transfers into everything that we do, and it ends up causing a slump. And as you slump, it slumps. And as it slumps, you become more ineffective. And slowly the business becomes grounds to a halt. The level of progress just dissipates and disappears. And yet I've seen so many businesses, certainly since COVID and lockdown, that have fallen into this level of mediocrity without understanding that we've got to go back to the drawing board. We've got to understand as to what do I want to achieve and how am I going to achieve that? And it's possible that the things that you are currently doing are holding you back from what it is that you want to be able to achieve and do. If this has resonated, I'd love to be able to hear from you. One of the things that we've created this year is something called the Pillars of Progress. It's a short intervention of just 3 months where we work interactively with you and your leadership team to be able to ensure that 1, we've got clear defined vision and values for you as an owner. For 2, that there's vision and values within the business are defined and aligned with what it is that you want to achieve. And then to ensure that the proper milestones of business, the marketing, the sales, the operations, the finance, the people are all working in alignment to ensure that it provides that you need from it. If that sounds of interest, I'd love to be able to have a conversation with you. Otherwise, I hope you've got much from today's episode on vision for the next 12 months. Like I say, I'd love to be able to hear from you and find out as to what are the key takeaways that you've taken from this episode. And I'll be back next week to talk more about how you can add a zero. God bless, take care. See you soon.
That's all for this episode. As always, we really thank you for listening and welcome your comments, thoughts, and suggestions. So please do drop us a line by emailing podcast@mytruenorth.biz. And don't forget, if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button on whichever platform you're listening to this through. And tell your colleagues and business network all about who we are. You've been listening to the Add a Zero podcast presented by Jay Allen. Brought to you in association with My True North, the UK's leading ethical coaching company.